You're watching News Central now on News Central Television. I'm Darshan Usman. The top stories this hour. Members of Nigeria's House of Representatives seek 6-year tenure for president, rotation among zones. Rivers State High Court says 27 pro-Wike lawmakers still PDP members. Detained Ugandan environmentalist Kwikiriza regains freedom after international pressure. Details in a moment. News Central now at this hour begins in Nigeria with legal matters where a group of about 30 lawmakers in the House of Representatives are seeking alterations to the 1999 Constitution to pave the way for the rotation of the presidency among the 6 geopolitical zones of the country. They also want an amendment to the Constitution to provide for a single tenure of 6 years for the president and governors of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Speaking on behalf of the group on Monday in Abuja, the member representing Ideto South, Ideto North Federal Constituency, Imo State, Ikenga Ugochinyere, said this will help ensure a reduction in the cost of governance and campaigns, unite the country, and bring about uninterrupted development. Still with legal issues, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission has opened its case against former Minister of Aviation Hadi Sirika by calling its first witness Azubike Okorie. Okorie is a subpoenaed witness is the former director of procurement of the Federal Ministry of Aviation. He was thereafter appointed special assistant to the former minister. Now, the case has been adjourned to Tuesday for continuation of hearing. Sirika, alongside his daughter, son-in-law, and Aldurak Investment Limited, are facing a 6-count charge of fraud to the tune of 7.2 billion naira in connection with the Nigerian Air project.
I can tell you that we open our case today and they ask for time to examine the witness. It's not for lawyers to watch the demeanor of the witnesses. It's prerogative of the trial judge. And like 5 witnesses, it's going to be very snappy. Yes.
Staying with legal issues, let's head to Rivers State, where a state high court has declared that Martin Amaole and 26 pro-Wike lawmakers are still members of the People's Democratic Party. Now, the court, in a ruling on Monday, struck out a suit filed by Wosa Amadi and 3 others seeking to declare the seats of the 27 lawmakers vacant following their defection to the All Progressives Congress. In his judgment, the presiding judge, Justice Okobule Basam, ruled that Martin Amaole and the 26 other lawmakers are still members of the PDP. Justice Basam also ruled that the claimants failed to prove to the court that the 27 lawmakers truly defected to the APC, noting that the said defection cannot be established through newspaper publications, radio announcements, or online publications. Announcing, or according to the court, a defection can only be established through the party membership register, a membership card, and such members fulfilling all requirements of their membership in the party. And now to labor matters. Organized labor has announced that the 1-week grace period given to the federal government will expire at midnight on Tuesday, June 11th, 2024. Now, speaking during the interview on Monday, Chris Onyeka, an Assistant General Secretary of the NLC, stated that if the federal government and National Assembly fail to meet workers' demands by then, the Nigeria Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress will convene to decide on resuming the nationwide industrial action that was paused last week. Onyeka emphasized that Labour will not accept a minimum wage of 62,000 naira or 100,000 naira, referring to these amounts as starvation wages. He reaffirmed Labour's demand for a 250,000 naira minimum wage as proposed at the latest meeting of the Tripartite Committee on Minimum Wage on Friday, which they consider a living wage for the average Nigerian worker. Earlier, News Central correspondent Emmanuel Bagudu, who has been following this latest developments, spoke to us on this development. We'll come back to Emmanuel Bagudu later on. Meanwhile, the federal government may be on a coalition course with governors and the private sector for agreeing to pay a minimum wage higher than 60,000 naira. Nigerian governors and the organized private sector are against paying as high as 60,000 naira, as they insist that any figure above 57,000 naira may not be suitable. Now, however, every day Nigerians are of a different view. News Central's Bettina Nweli reports.
A major argument by the governors, according to sources, is that the state will be left with nothing for developmental projects if they accept to pay a minimum wage above 57,000 naira, as they would have to pay a large chunk of their resources as wages to workers.
I'm going to speak from the perspective of a salary earner, and I'm in Nigeria, so I can see the economy very clearly that it is not something to write home about. Currently, 60K, I can't even say what, 60K is almost nothing at this point. It's not even, it's like 100K is the new 10K.
I bet me government, made everybody improve the money, made the money increase, like 200,000. But if say in dollar, now they won't pay me, they pay in dollar.
First of all, I have to commend the chairman or the president of the NLC. He has done a very good job for all Nigerians workers. Secondly, the proposal of 250,000 naira from the NLC, it's a good one. And I stand to support it, and every meaningful Nigerian stands to support that.
However, the negotiation for a new minimum wage is far from over, as the organized labor as well as the federal government continue to make offers and counter-offers. Last Tuesday, the Nigeria Labour Congress (NLC) agreed to pause the strike for negotiations, giving the federal government 1 week to negotiate, after which the strike would continue if their demands are not met.
Continuing the strike is actually not going to be a good solution, because even though they continue and they still don't do the strike, the government will still take their decision. That's what I feel. So the strike, but still, if they still do the strike, it's still going to hurt, because the cost of things now is so expensive in the market.
I don't think they should accept the 62,000, because the country is hard. A lot has been happening. We run a business, like we're employing in a company. We are not getting anything like increasing our salary, and the chief fare is kind of crazy, you know.
The government had initially proposed 48,000 naira and 54,000 naira last week, which were also rejected by the organized labor. It remains to be seen how much further the NLC are willing to push and how much more compromise the government is willing to make. In Lagos, for News Central, Bettina Nweli.
Thank you, Bettina, for that report. Now, international financiers that are meant to fund the construction of about 20 modular refineries in Nigeria have withheld their funds due to the challenge of getting guarantees for crude oil supply to the facilities when they are completed. The majority of foreign oil corporations that produce crude oil in Nigeria have not been able to promise financiers that crude will be provided to the modular refineries when the facilities are ready to produce refined petroleum products. Now, based on this, those who funded the facilities withheld their money pending when the federal government would persuade IOCs to give the assurances necessary for the supply of crude oil to modular refiners. To discuss this, we're joined by Temitokpe Kolade, Senior Manager and Lead ESG and Climate Change Services at Anderson. Hello, Temitokpe. Thank you so much for joining us at this time.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Good afternoon. Now, Temitokpe, given the concerns of international financiers, what alternative crude oil supply options could be explored to ensure the viability of these 20 modular refineries?
Well, the truth is we do have indigenous producers of petroleum, crude oil in itself. And so those should not really be some sort of alternatives, but the chances are very limited other than the fact that we have IOCs and the indigenous producers. You would have to probably talk about importing crude into Nigeria, which is going to come at its own cost as well. We know that in the recent past, Dangote had to look out of Nigeria to even get crude oil to get his refinery working, for instance. So the implication of this is that, again, if these modular refineries, which are smaller, have to do this, it's going to be a very great strain for the operationalization.
Okay. Now, but how can the Nigerian government incentivize international oil companies, to provide crude oil supply guarantees, emphasis on guarantees, to these modular refineries?
I think it's a very tough one, even for the federal government, and they've expressed it in their report, for instance, that we also need you to demonstrate as modular refinery operators that you are really ready to run. So it's more like the case of the chicken and the egg, which goes first, right? While they're saying, oh, we need guarantees so that financiers can come and put in money and ensure that our equipment are running and we are ready to refine. They're also saying we can't give you the guarantees until we see that you have moved your, implementation of and construction work of the refineries to a very reasonable point, and we are sure that you're not just going to do arbitrage. You're not going to buy off the crude and you sell at some margins from us. So I think it's a tough one, even for the federal government, and the NUPRC had said, see, we need you to also go forward and show that you are really ready for this. Again, because it's a pricing issue. In the long run, anyone who produces crude would understand that sometimes you even need forward markets. You need off-takers that you've had contracts with already, and you can already sell to them and not just waiting for the modular refineries. And I agree that maybe the government needs to come in and say, oh, we need some sort of demonstration of domestic supply, meeting this domestic supply obligation, which is already enshrined in the Petroleum Industry Act. And maybe that's where the regulator could indeed come in and say, oh, you know what? When you get to this percentage of completion of your modular refineries, we will help you engage with the IOCs and all other producers of crude oil, and then we'll see how we give some sort of conditional guarantees maybe that would help to secure the funding that you also need for completion.
All right, now you did talk about, this basically being a pricing issue, but beyond the current impasse or beyond the pricing issue, are there other broader challenges facing the development and operation of modular refineries in Nigeria? Because it does seem like, a case of taking 2 steps forward and 5 steps backwards.
Apparently, because if you check it, the crude oil production in Nigeria, the output has not been stable. And in recent times, it's been more of going on the low than even going up. Right. And again, you realize that just recently, the NNPCL and the federal government secured funding through Afrexim to ensure that, oh, you know what, we have some natural resources that are backing this sort of funding that we're getting. And again, that only means that you have sold even the crude oil that you expect to produce in the future. And so these are some of the challenges that we face as a nation in terms of the fact that production is not at its peak, is not at its optimum, and then the little that we think would even produce in the long run or in the medium term, we've forward sold them to the extent that we now need to plead with more people to produce, and so we can meet the needs. And so much so that even Dangote Refinery, like I mentioned earlier, has to seek for importation of crude to produce refined products in Nigeria. It's really not a good place that we are in Nigeria, but apparently if you're going to solve that impasse, then we have to get more investment into oil production in Nigeria, and we have to deal with the security issues at the same time.
Okay, now let's speak to the future now, Temi Tokwe. Now, in the event that these 20 refineries are not built, which will definitely be a huge loss for Nigeria, what are the potential economic consequences for Nigeria, considering the goal of increased domestic refining capacity?
Well, I think you've answered the question already because we won't be able to meet that domestic production capacity. And that would mean a lot for our foreign exchange system that we're already having a very tough time within the country. It means that we're going to be import dependent for quite a while, even though we have Dangote refinery operating already, and then we have some impact on diesel, but you would expect that it shouldn't also be a monopoly. We should have all the modular refineries working, and that we can indeed be like the West African hub at the least for petroleum products. And so if we're going to achieve that dream, we've got to ensure that these modular refineries work. And I mean, these are private people apparently, and it means that they want to do business in the most certain and sincere manners that will allow market system to run. Otherwise, we'll continue to have a regulated petroleum system in Nigeria. We'll continue to deal with issues of whether we are paying subsidy or we are not. And those non-transparent issues will continue to linger if we don't deal with it. So the implications are a lot, but primarily because, primarily what you would expect is that we continue to be an import-dependent country, whereas we produce crude, and that's not good for the financial system of the country, aside from just the energy security issues that are also attendant.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Temi Tokwe, for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak to us.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, with that, we'll take a quick break. And when we come back, the news continues. Stay with us. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. Now, the Nigerian police force has addressed mounting concerns over the rising number of arrests targeting journalists in Nigeria. This response comes amid growing pushback surrounding perceived human rights violations and threats to freedom of expression in the country. News Central's Ni Omoni provides more insight.
The arrest of journalists in part of Nigeria has raised concerns about press freedom in the country, according to human rights groups. Daniel Ojukwu and Segun Olatunji's detention most recently are a few of the many cases cited by the Nigerian Guild of Editors.
The instrumentality of the Nigerian security apparatus is set loose on these individuals as soon as they express views unfavorable to the administration, or in the case of journalists, as soon as they publish credible stories that cast the administration in an unflattering light.
The police is giving conditions, bail conditions, as if Daniel Ojukwu committed murder. Go and bring two directors in the Federal Civil Service with landed property. How can you be a director in the Federal Civil Service and have landed property in Abuja if you are not corrupt? That's another oxymoron.
In recent days, media organizations and rights groups have condemned the methods used to arrest journalists, the lengthy detentions, and the inhumane treatment to which they are subjected. They said these actions showed a concerning regression in Nigeria's respect for human and civil rights. However, at the inaugural meeting of the Strategic Communications Interagency Advisory Policy Committee in Abuja, the police denied abducting any journalists and noted that inviting journalists is not a mandatory part of the arrest process.
I want to clear this, I've clarified this, that we are not obliged to even send invitation to any suspect in force. It's just a mark of respect. We are sending to you. There's no law that says you must invite somebody before you carry on with your investigation. No. We can only honor you by saying, okay, let's extend the invitation to you. Let him come and explain. But where you don't honor invitation, we go to court and get warrant. Once we have that warrant, we can even declare you wanted. That's the law. We can declare you wanted and you can arrest you anywhere.
The police actions continue to draw sharp criticism from media groups who state that arresting journalists without due process is unacceptable.
We want a country where people are able to speak, because freedom of expression is a guaranteed right for Nigerians. So we are able to speak truth to power in this kind of situation. But the interesting thing is that the CBN is using the amended Cybercrime Act to extort you, The police is using the old Cybercrime Act to oppress journalists.
Nigeria has been ranked low in press freedom by organizations like Reporters Without Borders. Lamenting the situation, local and international organizations called on Nigerians to advocate against what they call an attempt to suppress freedom of expression and civil society. In Lagos for News Central, Ni Omoni.
In a country like Nigeria, where opportunities are scarce, how many get to women? Now, questions like this have led to transformative and intensified actions to grant women access to education and representation in the political spheres. News Central's Chidima Ona shares more in this report.
For decades, Nigerian women have faced challenges in achieving equal access to education and political participation. The lack of education has often limited their career opportunities and hindered their ability to advocate for themselves and their communities. However, the growing movement of feminism is pushing for change.
Feminism just refers to equality of gender, giving gender equal access to opportunities. That's just a simple form. Giving equal opportunities, so whereby both gender, all genders, or whichever way you would like to classify it as, have equal opportunities to social opportunities, economic opportunities, political opportunities. It starts from even school, educating the female children that it's not all about, fine, we're encouraging children, female children now to be engineers and things like that. But politics, we need to encourage female children to, look at politics as future career prospect and things like that.
Another important untapped area is that of legislation and policy making. As a country, it is vital to note that empowering women through education and political representation is fundamental to unlocking a brighter future for Nigerian women.
For us to have gender caucuses or women caucuses or female caucuses in the National Assembly, we have to first of all be elected as women. If women are not elected, how do you speak of caucuses? So it's very important for us to start talking about how women will be well represented by first of all start to advocate, campaign and canvass.
By having women visibly participating in politics and having more women representation, you could see that there are concrete examples across the world where parliaments that have more women have changed the country.
In light of these pressing issues, government initiatives and civil society programs are working to bridge the educational and legislative gaps by investing in girls' education and encouraging women to run for office, which creates a better Nigeria where all citizens have equal opportunity to thrive.
You're still watching News Central now. Coming up after the break, fighting in Sudan shuts last hospital in Darfur. We'll tell you more after this break. The news continues in East Africa, where medical charity Doctors Without Borders says the last operating hospital in Western Sudan's El Fasher has been closed after an attack by paramilitaries trying to seize the key to Darfur city. Now, war has raged for more than a year between the regular military under Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and the paramilitary rapid support forces led by his former deputy, Mohammed Hamdan Daglo. El Fasher in North Darfur is the only state capital in the vast western region not under RSF control and is a key humanitarian hub for a region on the brink of famine. El Fasher has seen sporadic clashes since the war broke out in April 2023, but fierce fighting reignited on May 10th in what UN Chief Antonio Guterres has called an alarming new chapter in the conflict. An environmental activist in Uganda who is opposed to a huge oil project led by French giant Total Energies has been freed after 5 days in detention. Now, Stephen Kwikiriza was found on Sunday evening dumped on a roadside in Kenjojo, about 5 hours drive west of this capital, Kampala. Now, the activist had said he was bitten by army officers. Samuel Okuloni, director of the Environment Governance Institute, lauded international pressure for the release of Kwikiriza. Global rights groups had raised concerns about Kwikiriza's fate after he went missing on Tuesday. Amnesty International and the Mozambique Human Rights Defenders Network are demanding that the Mozambican authorities investigate the arrest of a human rights advocate and journalist, Sheila Wilson, following a demonstration in the capital of Maputo. Amnesty International says that the arrest of Wilson highlights the harsh treatment that journalists faced in Mozambique and a grave violation of the right to information, freedom of expression and opinion, and freedom of the press. Now, according to Wilson, during the arrest, police officers grabbed her, threw her under the seat of a police van, and took her to the 4th station in Maputo, where she was held for 6 hours without being allowed to contact anyone. Now, to discuss this, we're joined by Jeremiah Langa, chairperson of the non-governmental organization Media Institute of Southern Africa, that's MISA. He joins us from Maputo. Hello, Jeremiah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
All right, now speak to us. What are the charges against Wilson, and what evidence does the authorities claim to have against her?
There's no charge, at least known publicity, because what we know, and I'm a chairperson of MISA, the main non-government organization that working to promote freedom of expression, media freedom, access to information. And we have been dealing with the government and with other public organizations. And until now, it's been quite a week. We have no charge, we have no information in terms of what charge the authorities are claiming to
have against her.
To have against her, yes.
All right, so since there are no charges, how has her arrest and detention affected her family and colleagues, and what support is being provided to her at the moment?
Of course, it's been affecting, especially, it's been affecting the journalist, her family, and in general, all the journalists here in Mozambique, because it's something that doesn't make sense. What happened? She was covering the demonstration of some activities in Main Street here in Maputo, and she was suddenly surprised by the police. She was alive. Imagine she was alive, and the police went to them and took her camera and took on her and put inside of a car, police car, and took her to the police station. So, and she was released after 4 or 5 years, more or less. And we have been, as a MISA, we have been questioning.
I'm sorry, did you say she was released after 4 or 5 years or 4 or 5 days?
Exactly. 4 or 5 years. It's 4 or 5 hours.
Oh, hours, okay. All right, okay, thank you for giving us an idea of how she was arrested. Well, you did say that her arrest didn't make sense, and the fact that she hasn't been charged doesn't mean that are there any concerns that, doesn't mean that her arrest was targeted, on her journalistic work or a broader attempt to silence independent voices in Mozambique?
Yes. There are many concerns because this is the second case we are having in the last 6 months. Okay, remember that 6 months ago, a prominent journalist, Mozambican journalist, was murdered here in Maputo, and until now we have no any information from the public prosecutor in terms of how is going the investigation. They have promised to come out and inform in terms of how it's been the investigation. But it's been 6 months and we have no information. We as a MISA, we have written to the General Prosecutor asking for information, but
All right, we
we
seem to be having a problem with your network, but thank you so much, Jeremiah, for speaking to us on this. Now, in other news from around the world, Israeli War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz has quit the emergency government in a sign of deepening divisions over Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's post-conflict plans for Gaza. Now, speaking during a news conference in Tel Aviv on Sunday, where he announced his resignation, Gantz said the decision was made with a heavy heart. Benjamin Netanyahu responded with a post on X saying, "This is not the time to quit the campaign. This is the time to join forces." His centrist National Unity Party was in opposition until October 11, 2023, when after the start of the war following Hamas's 7th October attacks, he agreed to form an emergency government with Netanyahu. Immediately after the announcement, far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir demanded a place in the war cabinet.
בלב כבד, אך בלב שלם.
For more on this, I'm joined by international correspondent Afia Hagen. Hello, Afia. Thank you for joining us. Now, how big of a blow is the resignation of Benny Gantz to Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, Benny Gantz, as you very rightly said, there was in opposition until the October 7th attack and decided to join this three-man, if you will, war cabinet. Now, he is someone who was a former leader of the IDF, a man of great stature, so to speak. But he also gave Benjamin Netanyahu credibility. At a time where he was seen as being quite far to the right, he was someone who could be seen as balancing the war cabinet in some way. He brought in support for Benjamin Netanyahu when he really needed it the most. And it will see Benjamin Netanyahu now having to rely more heavily on that far-right element of the cabinet, ultra-nationalist parties. And they angered Washington and other parts of the world, other potential allies, before the war in Gaza had even started. Now, Benny Gantz has said to Mr. Netanyahu that he must set an election date of October the 7th this year. That will be the one-year anniversary of that terrorist attack committed by Hamas. And he's accused the Prime Minister of using this war for his own political ambitions and desires for the state of Israel, and said that he's slow-walking this war for his own political gain. So it's not game over for Benjamin Netanyahu by any way, shape or form, but this is a body blow to him, most certainly.
All right, Afia, now 4 hostages were released this weekend, right? And 3 other hostages were killed. What can you tell us about this?
That's right. So we did have that very daring rescue mission this weekend where we saw 4 hostages released. 3 hostages have been killed. That's according to Hamas. They've also said that 274 Palestinians lost their lives in that rescue operation as well. It's thought that there was gunfire, hand-to-hand combat and airstrikes used in this particular rescue mission to get those hostages out. Now, 250 hostages were taken on October the 7th. 120 of them remain in Gaza and 43 of them are pronounced dead. Now, today, of course, you do have joy amongst those families of the hostages that were released. One of them named Noah, a woman who's quite famous, actually, in viral videos from the October 7th attacks, where you see her being taken away on motorbikes, and she's pleading for help, pleading to be rescued. She was one of the people that was recovered in that operation. But relatives saying today, like I said, although they have great joy that their particular relatives have been released, they have called for Benjamin Netanyahu to do more for the hostages that remain inside Gaza.
All right. Now, Afia, is there any progress with negotiations for peace in this conflict?
Well, at the moment, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is traveling to the region, and he's traveling there for two reasons, two main goals. One is to increase pressure on both Hamas and Israel to accept a peace deal, and the second is to ensure that war doesn't spread further in the region, particularly to Lebanon. So he's going to be meeting with the Egyptian president, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi in Cairo before heading to Israel later this afternoon, when he will be holding discussions with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He will also travel to Jordan and Qatar later on this week. Now, Joe Biden at the end of last month outlined this sort of three-phase ceasefire proposal from Israel that envisions a permanent end to hostilities, the release of Israeli hostages as well as Palestinian prisoners, and the reconstruction of Gaza. Whether that deal will be accepted by Hamas remains to be seen. There's also whispers that Joe Biden might do a unilateral deal with Hamas directly to free American hostages who are being held by Hamas. That's been reported by NBC News. Now, these negotiations could take place as at the same time as the current ceasefire talks involving Israel, and even if they fail, those talks could go ahead anyway. So Antony Blinken on tour in the region, Cairo, Qatar, and Jordan. He'll be very busy trying to broker any kind of peace, and of course the release of hostages, as well as making sure that the conflict doesn't spread to any other parts of the region.
All right, thank you so much, Afia, for an update on that. Now, left-wing parties across the Nordics gained ground in the EU election, going against the trend of right-wing advances across Europe. Centrist mainstream parties kept an overall majority in the European Parliament, but extreme right parties scored several high-profile wins in the bloc. They finished first in France, Italy, and Austria, and came second in Germany and the Netherlands, according to preliminary results. In Sweden, the anti-immigration Sweden Democrats, which props up Ulf Kristersson's centre-right government, made history by losing ground in an election for the first time since its founding in the late 1980s. The Sweden Democrats became the country's second largest party behind the Social Democrats in Sweden's 2022 general election.
Results as soon as they came out. I'm pleased with how things went in Sweden, less pleased maybe with the European vote as a whole. In Sweden and the Nordic countries, there was a tilt towards the left, and the rest of Europe went the other way, so it seems like there's a bit of a mismatch there.
Well, the whole family voted, at least those who are allowed to vote. We think it's important for democracy and be able to have an impact on the European Union. I think it went fairly as expected, reasonably happy, I'd say. Some surprising results, but
for instance,
I think in Sweden, for example, the Green Party.
In business, the International Monetary Fund has predicted that Nigeria's economy will reach $1.85 trillion by 2029 in purchasing power parity terms. This forecast suggests a significant growth trajectory for the country's economy over the next 5 years. Now, according to the IMF data, Nigeria's gross domestic product in PPP terms has been steadily increasing from $1.36 trillion in 2023 and may reach $1.852 trillion in 2029. by Dr. Samson Simon, Chief Economist, ARKK Economies and Data Limited, and mentioned that the thing indeed is to ensure that this growth happens.
IMF seems optimistic that we shall be experiencing a growth in our GDP in terms of purchasing power parity by almost a quarter between now and 5 years' time. And that growth is contingent upon fixing insecurity, particularly around agriculture and oil production. So if insecurity is fixed, that's the most important problem. If that insecurity is fixed, and then we undergo the structural reforms that are required, then the economy is expected to grow and is projected to be in the region of 1.85 trillion by 2029. So agriculture is supposed to play a big part, oil production too, and infrastructure too should be major contributors to this growth that is expected to.
Still talking business, Frontal Nigeria Limited and Heritage Bank PLC are embroiled in a legal battle over a controversial 200 million naira loan arrangement. Beginning in 2008, Frontal, under the direction of Shamsuddin Owoni Fari, accused Heritage Bank, previously Spring Bank, of incorrectly categorizing the business as a debtor and debiting its accounts without the required authority. Oladipo Ajayi, head fixed income and FX Chapel Hill Denham Securities Limited on Business Edge, said that Frontal Nigeria would have to queue with other customers of the bank to get its owed money when the bank can pay.
Has been to a trial court, and they've been to the appeal court, and in both situations they actually won the case. And what's so alarming is that they first instituted a case against Spring Bank far back at 2009. And when you look at 2009 till today, it tells you what is happening in our legal system. Because if it takes someone over 15 years to actually get judgment in all these little cases, I don't think is something that anyone needs to actually applaud. And so Frontal has been back-to-back going to court around this case. And at the end of the day, they've gotten judgment.
And the world of sports, following a 3-1 defeat to Heartland on match day 35 of the NPFL on Sunday, Doma United encountered an accident on their journey back to Gombe along the Makurdi-Lafia Road. The bus overturned multiple times, but thankfully there were no fatalities. Several players sustained injuries and have been promptly taken to the hospital for treatment. The incident happened as they returned from Owerri after the game against Heartland. Abubakar Bala's team, struggling to avoid relegation from the NPFL, faced disappointment both on the field and on the road. Doma FC are placed 18th on the NPFL table with 43 points from 35 matches. Lens have appointed English manager Will Still as their new boss following his departure from Reims towards the end of the League One season. The 31-year-old, who had been linked with several English clubs, became the youngest coach in Europe's top 5 leagues when, at the age of 30, he took over the side from northern France initially on a caretaker basis in October 2022. He remained unbeaten in his first 17 matches in charge of Reims, setting a League One record and falling 1 game short of Europe's longest streak by a new manager achieved by Barcelona's Tito Villanova in 2012. And that's all at this hour. But before we go, let's take another look at some of our top stories. We told you that members of Nigeria's House of Representatives seek 6-year tenure for president, rotation among zones. We also told you that Rivers State High Court says 27 pro-Wike lawmakers still PDP members. Finally, you heard that detained Ugandan environmentalist Kwikiriza regains freedom after international pressure. Send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on the screen. Do follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I'm Darshan Usman.